Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership for TEPSA. And each week, I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another, and then bring them on to share pieces of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I'm thrilled for the conversation that I know is going to happen this week with Ray Blue. Ray, tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Awesome. Thanks for inviting me on, Todd. So my name is Ray Blue, and I was just saying that it almost feels a bit disingenuous to say Ray. Everybody just refers to me as Blue, so I'll invite you to do the same thing. But I am currently the Chief Development Officer at United Way for Greater Austin. Have been in the development space, wearing the jerseys for all sorts of different types of shops for the past 20 years or so, a little bit over 20 years. You can see a little bit of gray forming in the facial hair. Originally from North Carolina, which you may denote from what I'm told is a fairly thick twang or soupy drawl, but have been in Austin, here in Austin, Texas, since '99. So this is more familiar, I think, to me now than North Carolina. But have been at United Way, two different tours of duty in the same role. I was at United Way for Greater Austin back from about 2000 to 2008, and then started a few other new chapters, and then was convinced to pull my jersey out of retirement 2 years ago this past November. So we've been busy changing things up a lot, but originally from North Carolina, have a beautiful wife, two lovely daughters, and again, thrilled to spend some of my evening with you tonight.
Yeah, so Ray, growing up in North Carolina, what brings you to what brought you to Texas? Was it United Way?
No. I did my undergraduate work in the mountains of North Carolina, there in Asheville, where I spent as much time in the trout streams as I did the classroom. And then went to grad school in Atlanta. I did spent 4 years there in Atlanta, where I went to Emory, and then realized, as much as I love my family, we need about 1,000 miles between us to maintain a healthy relationship. And I was the first person from my family to. I was first generation college student, and
Yeah.
I think always just had more of an explorer makeup than most of the folks from my family. So I just wanted to get out and explore, and picked a couple of cities when I finished up my work there at Emory in Atlanta, that I thought would be a good fit for me culturally and socially, and moved here to Austin without knowing anybody back, like I said,
Wow.
in '99. So it obviously worked. So it was a
Now,
good
was
fit.
that before wife or after?
That was right around the same time. Yes. So
So is she from North Carolina? So she had to take the leap with you?
originally from Texas. No. So
Okay.
I don't think that was by design, looking back on it, but it worked out for the best.
That's right. Well, you mentioned that you currently work for United Way and that you've worked actually for United Way twice over the last couple decades. And so what brought you to an organization like United Way? And for those who may not truly know what United Way is or what they do, how would you describe it?
Yeah, great question. So, United Way, I first should say that there are United Ways all across the country, and that every United Way is an independent organization that's governed by its own board of directors, and they are able to decide how they want to go about their work in their respective communities. Because one of the red threads that binds all United Ways together is that they're trying to make their community a better place, whatever that looks like. And because communities and their challenges are so individual, the individual organizations are able to decide exactly what they want to tackle and how they want to tackle it. So we're unique here in Austin in what our focus areas are, and sort of how we're getting after it. So about 2 years ago, our board underwent a year-long strategic visioning and planning process. And I will bring this back around, because this is why I pulled my jersey out of retirement. But there were a couple of things that came out of that visioning, year-long visioning session. One was they kept coming back to the fact that even though Austin is one of the most desirable cities to live in the United States, and we're at the top of a lot of top 10 lists, we're also one of the most economically segregated cities in the United States, top 10, top 3 in Texas. And what that means is that there's a growing gap between those who are doing really well and able to reach their full potential, and then those who are falling further and further behind, barely able to make it. And our board of directors decided that United Way was uniquely positioned, given our almost 100-year history here in the community in Austin, and the fact that we sit in the center as the hub for several different sectors: the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, to really get after some of those root causes that perpetually keep the systems in place that cause poverty to be an intergenerational challenge. So they re-envisioned the mission, which is to bring people, ideas, and resources together to fight poverty in Austin, and to work on building large-scale community-wide collaborations that are designed to dismantle those systems that cause that opportunity gap to be growing at such an alarming rate. So that was the reason that I decided to pull my jersey out of retirement, like I said, and rejoin the team a little over 2 years ago. There was a new CEO who had just taken the mantle, who was beloved in the city, a gentleman named David Smith, who was not from the United Way system and had some really innovative ideas about how to bring the community together. And I grew up in a socioeconomically challenged family back in North Carolina. So the mission really made my gut burn. So the chance to come back, use my 20 years of experience, primarily here in the Austin area, to help build and develop sort of a development machine that was needed to fuel the execution of this new strategic plan was just a really cool idea that cool opportunity that I couldn't pass up.
Well, I want to kind of dive into something you just mentioned there. You mentioned that you have your own kind of history growing up in a socioeconomic family that had needs that some families may not know of. Is that kind of what drove you to wanting to work in organizations like United Way?
That's a great question, Todd. The answer is yes. I'm just thinking back on some of the key turns in my own life that really highlighted that for me. It's an unequivocal yes, absolutely. I think, I spent a lot of time reflecting on the path that has brought me here, and every time I do, I'm drawn back towards those pivotal moments, those inflection moments where I either encountered someone who saw something in me that I didn't have the ability to see, or helped to sort of take the paper towel roll down from my eyes so I could see things a little bit broader, a little bit bigger, and in so doing, transform the way that I saw the world and myself in it. And I've always felt a deep sense of, not necessarily obligation, I don't think that's the right word, but some sense of calling to every tool that I'm able to put in my toolbox because of those moments along the way where that happened, especially given where I came from. To really give back in a way that is deeply fulfilling for me. So I do feel like that's a really insightful question.
Well, looking back on your life from childhood to adolescence to adult, what would you say is one of those instances that was really monumental into creating the man you are today?
Oh, man.
And I'm sure there's lots of examples you can think of. I mean, there's all kinds of things that impact us, but when that first hits your mind, what's one thing that comes to mind of, this really helped shape me to who I am today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I spent about 8 or 9 years as a guide on the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, cool.
And we started years ago. I helped start an outdoor adventure organization that was a nonprofit where we would take youth out. It started out as backpacking on the Appalachian Trail for week-long treks at a time, and then it grew into canoeing and biking and things like that. So I spent a lot of my formative years, out in the backcountry, leading groups through a pretty challenging and yet simple way of living. And looking back on it, it was incredibly formative, just in the way that I feel I'm able to help create a sense of community and team, and need to feel a part of those things, but also just in a it helped to instill in me a simple mindedness that, in the best use of the term, that's just able to see things in a practical, simple way, always able to stay focused on a solution. But I think a lot of the time that I spent in the wilderness was really, really formative to who I've grown into.
You've only mentioned a couple things, but already you have so many varied experiences that you've gone out there and been a part of, and that you've took part in them. When I think about things like that, what is something that you are really proud that you have accomplished through all the different experiences that you've had?
Let's see. That's a good question too. I'm not used to talking this much about myself. I'm used to asking other people about questions. So you've
I figured.
told me, you've got me a little uncomfortable. Um, you know, um, I've gotten into long distance running over the past few years. I love backpacking and I love running. So I got into trail running the past couple of years, which is sort of a chocolate peanut butter combination for me. And done several I've done several really, really long runs, and it's interesting how many tools I've put in my toolbox since doing that I use day in and day out,
Really?
just of of just keeping moving, and perseverance. And so I'm really pleased, really proud of myself for just the training and the work that it takes to go into preparing for something
Right.
that is of an endurance. There are a lot of similarities. When I came back to United Way in November, we started what ended up being a complete rebuild of a pretty sophisticated department. And it was interesting how many parallels I could draw, being in the office all day, just tearing things down, breaking bones, resetting them, throwing some bones completely, and then going home in the evenings and going for a couple of hours, of a run in the wood. There were a lot of parallels. So I would say some of the things that I've done in the endurance realm have been really
I, I'm
proud.
laughing because I'm like, gosh, like 5 minutes of running and I'm over it. I can't even imagine going running for hours. I'm
I
like,
get that a
golly, I
lot.
die.
Oh,
So, looking at United Way, and I'm in Austin quite a bit for a bunch of different things, and our TEPSA offices are actually located in Austin too. Um, what is something that United Way has been a part of or has done that maybe a lot of people wouldn't know that organizations like United Way does?
yeah, that's a great call, a great question too. So we've got several new large-scale community collaborations that are showing our new approach for pulling the right organizations together to build common goals, shared blueprints, and just coordinating our efforts accomplishes so much more than when we try to go it alone. One is called Family Connects Central Texas. So this is a partnership between United Way, Austin Public Health, and St. David's, currently St. David's Healthcare. And what we do is, for every new birth, every new child that is born in Austin, there are around 38 a day, which I think translates to about 14,000 a year here in Austin. Every every child that is born, we're piloting it in one hospital right now, St. David South, but we're wanting to scale across the city, qualifies to receive a free home visit from a registered nurse practitioner within the first couple of weeks after going home. And this was modeled after a project in Durham with the Duke Endowment. And after just a couple of years of implementing this this collaboration in Durham, the results were just off the charts in terms of reduction in infant mortality and depression, postpartum depression, you name it. And all of the stats showed significant improvements. So we applied for a grant a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. We're able to bring that to Austin. It's the only place that it existed in Texas at the time, and it wouldn't have come to Austin if it weren't for us stepping into this new role.
Right.
And after a year and a half in the partnership, it's already, the numbers that we're seeing are already staggering. So we're in conversations with Seton now to begin expanding into the other healthcare network, and would love to have it citywide before too long.
That is so interesting. And when you think about people who are afforded different things in their lives, they take for granted the resources they have when they go home from the hospital. And so being able to have an organization like that who will come out and provide a visit, because I think too, I think about, when people come home from things like that or surgery or anything, they don't even know what they don't know until they're in the midst of it. And so they don't even know what to ask until they're there. And then sometimes people feel uncomfortable going back to a doctor or back to somebody else to asking because they don't want to look ignorant. And so I think for an opportunity like that to send a nurse practitioner out to their home, that's game changing. And I've never heard of anything like that. So that's so cool.
It really is. It really is. And so much of the work that we're doing right now is geared towards making sure that every kid, when their butt hits that seat on the first day of kindergarten, is ready to learn.
Right.
And I don't have to tell you, you know better than I do, how many kids are showing up on that first day of kindergarten not ready to learn.
Right.
And it starts the moment that child comes out into this world and goes home with mom and or dad or the caregivers. And that's why the Family Connects program is such a vital piece. Like, we can't even get to early, high quality pre-K if a child isn't, reaching those very basic milestones within the first months of coming home. So it starts that continuum of care from the earliest points, so that, again, when that child hits kindergarten, they're ready to learn and can stay on track throughout the course of their career.
Well, Ray, if there's people listening or watching this and they're moved by what's being said, or they've been sitting at home thinking, I want to get involved with stuff like this, I want to volunteer, I want to help in some way, what would your advice be for them to get started on a way that they can help or support?
Yeah, great question. That's at the heart of what my team's primary responsibility is. We've got this vision for a city here in Austin where, everybody's success is tied into everyone else's success. And when we see someone who is falling behind, like, that affects me personally. That's our vision for the city. And we really believe in our core that if we're going to realize that vision, Todd, it's going to take everybody to care and to show up in some way that's meaningful for them. So, like, if you're here in Austin, I would say please check out our website. We've got some great resources that can just help sort of, like I said, take that paper towel roll down and help to show you a side of Austin that, if you happen to be on this side of that opportunity gap, you probably don't know that this side even exists. And it's not your fault. You shouldn't feel guilty about it. I didn't either until I immersed myself in this world. But I think whether you're in Austin or you're anywhere, your community has needs, and that there are people whose needs are hidden from you if you're fortunate enough to be to not be in a socioeconomically challenged situation. So I would say learn about your community, which is going to take a little bit of effort on your part. Do some reflection and find out what issues really are important to you. And then find organizations that make it easy to plug in. So that's one of the things, like I said, we're doing at United Way. We want to help educate folks, engage them through volunteer activities, and then activate them once they figure out what their personal passions are. I hope that answers.
Yeah, and there were two great things that that really stuck out to me with what you said. And one of those is education. You have to educate yourself. You can't just expect for somebody to find you and say, hey, we really want you to be a part. Like, you need to go out there and say, like, what are the needs and how can I help? Because I'm always of the belief of, I think all of us are given gifts. And whether those are financial gifts or spiritual gifts or physical gifts, that we have to be using to help others. And I think when we sit back and don't do anything, it's like we're just spitting on the gifts that we've been given. And so any opportunities that we have to volunteer our time or to give resources or just to educate ourselves so we make better choices, I think all of that is important. So I love that you said that, educating yourself is important, because there are always, no matter where you live, an organization who needs help, who needs financial or physical help. There's never enough of it. There's never enough to go around. So any way that people can get involved, the better. Well, Ray, I've really loved this conversation today. And, United Way is one of those, to me, it's one of those organizations like Red Cross or World Vision. I mean, we hear about it all the time, but do we really take the time to dive in and see what they're about and how we can help and support? And so I appreciate you making some time. But one question I always love to end all of my conversations on is, if there was one thing about anything that you wish more people knew or understood, what would your one thing be?
I think it really does tie into one of the threads of this conversation, Todd, just the intrinsic connection that we have with one another. I just, at the end of the day, we are pack animals. We're social creatures. We need one another. We belong to one another. And life is so much more meaningful when we actively participate in making your group, whatever that group is, whatever you define as community, better. And when we lift one another up, when we help one another, it makes you more of who you are. So I think that what we're seeing right now is that I think people are hungry for that. I think that there's something inside people that has started to wake up, that wants to reconnect and participate with other living human beings and sort of plug out of the matrix that we have sort of plugged ourselves into. So I would just encourage folks, when you hear that rumbling deep inside that is drawing you to participate with other human beings and reconnect in maybe ways that feel a little bit unfamiliar, listen to it, give heed. And I really do think we can do some amazing things when we learn how to reconnect in meaningful ways.
I love that. And that's the perfect way to end this episode. Ray, thank you so much for making time to chat with me. I know you're busy, and I know you were probably like, an education podcast wants me on, but I am so glad that you came on and shared some of your story, and I appreciate you.
Todd, thanks so much for what you're doing, man. You have an authenticity about you that's just 100% genuine, and your energy is contagious. So thank you for what you're doing. It's a real pleasure to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your listening pleasure. This podcast is there. I hope this conversation with Blue today has been encouraging and inspiring and taught you something new. And hopefully it has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.